Greetings again, friends. We started this great study on reasons you can trust the Bible. Now, I introduced this the time before last and discussed four lists of reasons why you can trust the Bible. Now, I decided after looking at all those reasons that it would be good to condense them down to a list of the top 10 reasons to trust the Bible. So go check that video out also and see those top 10. Now, I will give those to you again now as we work from descending order and the detailed study as we go through. I did these in 2-word descriptions to make it easier to remember also. So in descending order, the reasons to trust the Bible are, the top 10 reasons are 10, realistic depictions, 9, scientific accuracy, 8, transforming power, 7, reliable transmission, 6, historical accuracy, 5, unified message, 4, eyewitness testimonies, 3, Messiah stamp, 2, predictive proof, and 1, spiritual connection. Now, we're going to take each of those, as I said, and go through them in detail. And all of these are going to be in the playlist that includes others related to trusting the Bible in that God Communicating to Man playlist. Now, this 10th lesson that you can trust the Bible is realistic depictions. Now, I looked this up to see just how many different people are listed in the Bible. And it is said to be 3,000 to anywhere from 3,000 to 3,400 people, distinct people listed in the Bible. And if you look at all those people, that's everybody named. But if you look at all the people, you can kind of narrow it to 30 to 40 main characters or people that are talked about in the Bible. But it's interesting to see how that in the Bible, as it develops these main characters, it gives you a realistic depiction of their life. It is not afraid to talk about good and bad. And one of the things that is often true in a book talking about a hero or in a historical account of hero, and we see this with kings in the archaeological record also, but they tend to make the hero or the king to be more virtuous than they are. And there aren't many negative things about them. But the Bible gives a negative aspect and positive of different people and just a realistic understanding of their life. And so you don't have this embellishment that you might have or the leaving out a lot of things that would be negative that is in the Bible, because it's there for us to study and learn from. Now, that makes it different, and in its history, giving this historical accuracy, it helps us to understand the good things and the faults of these characters. And the message, of course, is seen to be a unified message because it is written by, inspired by the Holy Spirit speaking. And we know that it is true for people in the world today that this realism is there. So we know God doesn't lie and that it corresponds to what we see from people. So we know this is the realism that we see in the Bible. Now, when you go to the beginning, you get to Adam, and you see at the very beginning, the first person mentioned is Adam, and he is one who clearly disobeyed God. You have this negative thing about what happened with him, and it cost all of mankind. Listen to Genesis 3:17. Then to Adam he said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Now God told Adam, just as he did for Eve and the serpent, that there would be consequences for their disobedience, and that it would be something that he knew. Adam knew what he was doing when he ate of that fruit. He reasoned that he should be with Eve, and he knew that that may not happen, so he ate of it, putting her above God, essentially, like is often done today when many men put a woman above God. But that's another video. I could talk on more detail. But the entire creation was cursed by what happened because of Adam's sin. And the New Testament even describes this in Romans 5:12. It says, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. Now, if you want to take a closer look at what happened because of sin, you could go to the video I did called The Problem Sin. But thinking about the Bible, there's another character that shows up pretty early, and that is the character of Noah. Now, Noah is one who found grace in the eyes of God and was able to be used by God to save mankind and the animal world from the flood of judgment that God sent. And we know that Noah was a righteous man in his day, but Noah even sinned. When he came off the ark, we see what happened. Genesis 9:20 and 21 say this. And Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. Then he drank of the wine and was drunk, and became uncovered in his tent. Now, thankfully, Shem and Japheth went in to respect their father, and backwards went in not to make fun of him, and covered him up in this drunken escapade that he had there. So we see God working through all of that as well. We could talk about that in another video also. But another great character of the Bible, one that is known by many people, even of many different faiths, is the man Abraham. Now, Abraham is this important character, and one who is even referenced today. Think about the Abraham Accords, the peace accords that are part of peace in the Middle East. That is because of the influence of Abraham. And Abraham was blessed by God, and he was promised things by God. But we see the faith that he had developed, and fear often guided what he did. In fact, he got together with his wife, Abram and Sarai, before God changed their name to Abraham and Sarah. He got together with her and plotted that anytime they would go to an area, because she was so beautiful, they were afraid Abram was afraid it would cause him problems. And so he would just say she was his sister, which might have technically been true, but he was deceiving, and when he went in, and it caused problems. Listen to this in Genesis 12 and 13. Therefore it will happen, when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you. So Abraham lied, and he involved Sarah in this lie, and Pharaoh at this time took her into his harem, and he potentially was going to take her as a wife. And yet God stopped that, and it was found out the relationship that they had. Listen to Genesis 12:18 and 19. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Now, therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go your way." Many years later, when Abraham came to King Abimelech, it is recorded in Genesis 22. "Now Abraham said of Sarah his wife, 'She is my sister.' And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah." So Abraham was still not to the place he needed to be in faith, perfectly more so, even though he is known as the father of all who would believe, and he did develop in his faith. It impacted a lot of his testimony as he went to places, and could have harmed Sarah even more if God had not stopped in and stopped anything from happening. Listen to Genesis 20, verse 9, with what happened with Abimelech. "And Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, 'What have you done to us? How have I offended you, that you have brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? You have done deeds to me that ought not to be done.'" So Abraham has a realistic depiction. He's a man who grew in his faith, and he is one who still had problems with doubting. Listen to this verse that talks about the big thing that causes the feud, even to this day, between Abraham's children. Listen to Genesis 16:2. "So Sarai said to Abram, 'See now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go in to my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her.' And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai." Now, friends, again, Abraham did not think clearly and put his doubt in with the wrong advice of his wife, and he unadvisedly, especially now we see, went in and made her his wife, Sarah's handmaid, Hagar, and she bore Ishmael from that. And of course, the promised seed was Isaac from Sarah, which God did provide later on. We see that. So we know that the realistic depiction is there. It's also there with the key character of Moses. Think about Moses. Now, he was an example of a man of great faith, of great power with God, a man who was known as the meekest man on earth. Yet Moses had a problem with anger, and he even got angry with the children of Israel and their debauchery in the valley of the mountain when he came down from the mountain, and he took what God had written with his finger, the Ten Commandments, and broke them in anger before the people. I should have had more respect for those commandments written by the very hand of God, but he did that, and God, of course, redid them for him later and wrote them again. We see that a problem could have gotten worse, and it's an example with Moses and what happened to him, even with his anger getting the best of him right toward the end of their wandering in the wilderness, because God had told him to speak to the rock then to give water, and instead he struck it twice, and it messed up what God had intended to be a type of Christ in the rock, giving water. And so listen to this verse in Numbers 20 to verse 12. "Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, 'Because you did not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them.'" Now that was a severe consequence. All of Moses' life had been to bring them into the promised land, but God said no, because Moses messed up in his anger and did that. David is another example I think of as one who was known as a man after God's own heart. But yet, look at the big thing that David did. There are many things you could point to, but David was definitely blessed by God and used by him, but he did a big thing in committing adultery when he really should have been leading his army. And he was at home, looked out and saw the beauty of Bathsheba bathing on the roof, and so he lusted after her, and he called her to him, and he committed adultery with her because her husband was at war. And so David tried to cover it up. When he found out she got pregnant from this, he called Uriah, her husband, back home to try to cover it up and encourage him to go and to lie with his wife and go back home, and gave him a bunch of meat and everything, food to eat, but he didn't do it. He stayed faithful to David and was ready to go back to battle, not to get settled in at home or anything. And so David then told him just to stick around for a few days. Then he did have food before him, and they ate, and he got him drunk too. David was trying to get him to go in his drunkenness to go home and to give in, but he didn't even do it then. So what David did was send a note by him to Joab when he went back, and the note was his death sentence, because he told Joab to put him at the hottest part of a battle and then withdraw and leave him alone, and thus it was murder. So this was a horrible thing that David did, and even impacting more. Listen to 2 Samuel 11:27. And when her mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Certainly, there's much more that could be said about that, because adultery and murder are two big consequent sins, and David was guilty of that. And there's many more we could talk about. We could go into talking about even David's son Solomon being giving this gift of wisdom in his innocency, more of a young man. When he became king, he did the right thing in asking for wisdom. Yet he, even though he was given wisdom like no other, he was a fool, because he married a lot of women and let those women turn his heart to idols. And so we get some good things, though, for God working through that, like even the book of Ecclesiastes, to help us to understand things there. But you could talk about a lot of other people, and you could even go into talking about the prophets of God and times that they got discouraged and doubted, and those realistic depictions of that, even with Elijah, and thinking about just the power and influence they had that could impact things, and yet they're still presented as fallible. Even with that power and influence, they're presented as weak human beings, and of course we see this through the Bible. Even the New Testament presents different people on the scene. Of course, the 12 disciples of Jesus, as you see in the Gospels, and they are presented in a realistic way, because you see them sometimes jealous of one another, and like when James and John wanted to be the first or sit beside Jesus at his left hand and his right, and Thomas when he was doubting and skeptical at times, and even when Christ had resurrected. We see Peter as one of the key apostles, the disciples of Christ, and how he is known for the 3 times that he denied even knowing Jesus Christ. When Jesus was taken to be turned over to the Romans, and to be able to be taken into custody for what the Jews had put them up to. So all of this is just showing in the Bible the realism of the Bible to be accurate and true, even to the point of showing these 12 great men of God, apostles, all forsaking Jesus at that time that he was taken into custody. So we know that the psalmist even worded it this way, because it says in Psalm 103:14, "For he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. Certainly, God knows we are fallen human beings, and we all fall short of His glory. Romans 3:23 says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." God lets us see the realistic depictions in His Word to help us understand we all are fallen and in need of the grace and mercy of God. This leads us also to contrast with the perfect human being, which is the God-man, Jesus Christ. And we see this from Peter, who had denied the Lord, and then Jesus encouraged him and used him greatly. In his letter, 1 Peter 2:22 and 23, it says about Jesus, "Who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth, who, when he was reviled, did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously." So we know that Jesus did no sin, and the realism of other characters helps us to see the realism of the Son of God, the God-man, Jesus Christ. In verse 24 of that same chapter that we looked at from Peter, it says this, "Who himself bore our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, having died to sins, might live for righteousness, by whose stripes you were healed." Friends, you can trust the Bible. You can know that there are realistic depictions in the Bible, and it can be trusted for this reason, among others, that we will go into detail in the coming weeks. Like this video, share it with others, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you'll be ready for that next video as we dig further into the reasons you can trust the Bible.